recent efforts to get magic mushrooms decriminalized have been brought forward. Support groups have gone around collecting signatures, although unsuccessfully. Now, why on earth would people want to do this? In 1955, R. Gordon Wasson, a mushroom enthusiast, traveled to Mexico to eat mushrooms traditionally used in tribal rituals. Brought them back to the U.S., and he wrote an article about them in a mushroom magazine. Scientists were extremely fascinated by his descriptions, so they requested a sample, and he gave them some mushrooms to study. Scientists then located the active compounds, a chemical called psilocybin. Research over psychedelic mushrooms after this exploded in the late 1950s. Most notably, a Harvard professor named Timothy Leary was inspired to try his own research. He conducted his research with Harvard students at his own home, where he played music, displayed art, and he tried to evoke a spiritual state. Most notably, he was later fired for using the mushrooms recreationally too much, sharing with his students, and not being very professional with them. So this study ended up inspiring a lot of recreational use in the 60s. And in the 1960s, there was also lots of research being done, but these were stopped when magic mushrooms were legalized in 1970. Mainly due to the heavy recreational use Timothy Leary inspired with this experiment. Why do people want to legalize them now? Magic mushrooms affect the serotonin receptors. Serotonin is a chemical in the brain that controls feelings of calmness and happiness. Psilocybin is very similar in structure to serotonin, and the psilocybin attaches to the serotonin receptors in place of the serotonin. Psilocybin makes these receptors much more receptive to serotonin interactions. So basically, these chemicals right here, they go at like a faster rate. The exchange of serotonin in your brain is triple. Many mental illnesses come from problems with the serotonin receptors, like OCD, anxiety, degenerative brain diseases, and PTSD. Actually, psilocybin works a lot like the active ingredient in a popular prescription for these diseases called Prozac. It connects to the serotonin receptors in the same exact way. Recently, new research over the effects of psilocybin has been conducted, and it's the first research since the 1960s. These experiments have mainly been focusing on difficult-to-treat mental illnesses. Charles Grob, a biomedical researcher at UCLA, tested moderate doses of psilocybin to treat depression in terminal cancer patients. The psilocybin worked well, like way above expectations. Many patients claimed to feel significantly less depressed, and others claimed to completely be rid of their depression. Another experiment on mice at UCLA showed psilocybin could possibly be used to treat PTSD. Mice were conditioned with shocks to be afraid of a certain noise. The noise was played with no shocks, but the mice were still afraid because they were conditioned to fear it. But after the psilocybin doses, the mice were able to unlearn this fear response, and the rate at which the mice unlearned these noises was astounding to the researchers. If we can remove conditioned fear responses in mice, we may be able to remove it in people as well. This would be particularly helpful in treating PTSD. People who have like really sensitive triggers, like by loud noises or thunder, it could be really helpful for those people. Another experiment, UVA, shows promise as well. Francisco A. Moreno used psilocybin to treat extremely severe cases of OCD. He aimed to treat patients who were traditionally resistant to other forms of OCD treatment, and these patients' symptoms were so bad they frequently thought harming themselves or others. Not only did the treatment help, some patients saw abatement from their symptoms for the first time in their entire lives, and the effects were instantaneous, where traditional OCD medication usually takes like weeks to take effect. Not to mention, psilocybin mushrooms are the only known treatment for cluster headaches. Cluster headaches are excruciating headaches centered around your forehead. It's most common in middle-aged working men, and pain from these headaches is so excruciating that some people have committed suicide to escape the pain. The cause of these headaches are unknown, but we do know that psilocybin is the only known treatment for these headaches. Common factor in all these experiments is that in every study, expectations of the effectiveness were far exceeded. Psilocybin was usually faster and more effective than the traditional treatments. So what's in the future for psilocybin research? A Approval for these experiments is really lengthy. Most of the research is being done at universities, and the boards for these schools can take upwards of 8 years to approve these experiments. And so researchers are working to remove the negative connotations around psilocybin and magic mushrooms in hopes of conducting more research for medicine. Also, in current experiments, the doses were legally limited. They weren't allowed to use the full doses that they were planning on, and researchers are very eager to see what the higher doses would do. Psilocybin mushrooms are probably not the be-all, end-all for all serotonin-related conditions, but these experiments show significant promise for patients who are resistant to conventional treatments. With time, we think